Welcome Aimee Winder-Newton to the stage.
Well, Natalie, last time I was on this stage, I was doing stand-up comedy at a political fundraiser. So if you'd rather have me do stand-up, I'm really bad, so I'm just kidding.
We've got a serious topic here we're going to chat with you about, but before we jump into the air quality questions, I want to get a little bit of insight about Aimee Winder-Newton. And I know that your family has a long history of public service. I believe your father served on the city council in Taylorsville, is this about right?
Yep.
You were on the planning commission, your brother's in the legislature, you're a Salt Lake County councilwoman. Where did you get this ethic of public service?
You know, for me, it all started back in '95 when we were part of unincorporated Salt Lake County. We were living in the Taylorsville area, and we were frustrated that we didn't have a voice. And so we incorporated, and I was involved in that incorporation effort, and then city government, it took off from there.
So a local government expert. We want to hear your one big idea for air quality.
Well, can I give you three big ideas?
The time is yours,
okay,
but
perfect.
We'll get more questions in.
So the first thing that I think about is, right now we have vehicle emissions that are causing most of our issues, but buildings are second, and in 2050 that's going to flip. So buildings are going to become more of an issue. And I wonder if there's something, when you go to buy a new car, you have the sticker that shows your miles per gallon. If we used HERS ratings or something to show what a home emissions would be, so when people build a new home and they can really see what the performance is going to be for that home, I think, then people can shop accordingly, and it's a good way to have some transparency on that. So there's one. The second one is more public-private partnerships. So we heard from the governor the great news on Tier 3 gas. I think that's fantastic. But, I wonder too, are there convenience stores and are there retail outlets that would be willing to put in charging stations, knowing that people are going to need 15 minutes to charge and maybe come in and grab a drink or a treat or something so that they can get some revenue from that. And we've got to do something to get more infrastructure there. Other ideas for public-private partnerships, just getting more of our employers to issue transit passes to their employees. So there's things like that I think we can look at.
Very good. Aimee, we are sitting here on the west side of Salt Lake City. This is an area that has some socioeconomic disadvantages. The data shows that air quality has a greater impact on neighborhoods in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas. Wondering what you would do to address that.
One of the frustrations that we have is transit isn't cheap or fast right now for most people. And so, when we look at, I'm involved in intergenerational poverty issues in Salt Lake County. And when we look at people who are struggling to get to their jobs or maybe dropping a child off at daycare beforehand, we've got to have some more convenience there. And so, I love what UTA is doing with piloting a program similar to Uber or Lyft, where you can use an app to arrange for a ride, and I think maybe there's some opportunities there. But we've got to strengthen the spine of front runner. We've got to do more for that so that we have a way for people to get to their employment in a good amount of time, and hopefully we can look at costs down the road too as we get that infrastructure in place.
Great. You and I have had a lot of conversations about growth in this state. I know that you've made growth a centerpiece of your campaign. I wondered if you could reflect for a minute on whether growth is good for air quality or bad for air quality.
It depends. It depends, I think, obviously growth is going to make it more difficult to have clean air, and I think we've got to handle it in a good way. I just had an experience last night, actually, in our county council meeting as we've talked about developments. We've got to make sure that as we're looking at growth issues, housing affordability, that we're putting density closer to freeways and transit. It's going to be terrible for our air quality if we have super dense neighborhoods in the outskirts of our communities. And so being able to make sure that we plan well is so important. One of the things that I want to do if I'm elected is bring the planning component back to the governor's office. Under Levitt's administration, it was the Office of Planning and Budget, and we need to have a strong planning component so that as we're looking at our statewide issues with growth, we've got a place where we can set good policy and then also help our local governments. I mean, I'm one who believes in city and county government involvement and the things that they bring to the table there, and whether it's zoning or whatever the issue is, we've got to be able to have some good principles and some great things that we can do to help our local governments.
How are you different than the other candidates, do you think, on the growth, environmental stewardship issues?
Well, first of all, I am the candidate in the race who has the most local government experience. I've spent 25 years in city and county government, and our next governor, I believe, needs to have that kind of local government experience. That's what is going to help us with our growth issues, and as we plan in advance, is somebody who understands the needs of cities and counties, who understands how they think, and who can work with them so that we can make sure that we're planning in a responsible way.
I want to ask you a health question. It's the most important part of air quality. You have heard the saying, "We are what we breathe." I want you to envision a mother talking to you, a constituent who has a child with asthma, who suffers during bad air days. She asks you, "What's your plan? How are you going to help?" Tell me your answer.
Well, first of all, I can relate with that mother. I have a daughter who has asthma, and it kills me every winter when she gets this cough that just doesn't seem to go away when we have these bad inversion days. I also have a child who struggled with mental health, and we know that our poor air is affecting other aspects of health, whether it's mental health, miscarriages. There's a list of things that it's impacting, and I'm very concerned about that. Even emergency rooms, I think it's 40% increase on bad air days for our emergency rooms. And so when we look at the health issues, we should never have to make the decision between growth or our children's health. And to me, it's devastating. And so when we talk about the different things that we need to be doing, to me, it just lights a fire under me to realize that we've got to execute on these things that we've talked about. I mean, we're going to be talking tonight about all these different opportunities, whether it's mass transit, whether it's going electric and having more infrastructure there. There's so many things that we can do, even in an education. I mean, one of the great things about UCAIR is I've been educated on not letting my car idle in my garage and get nice and warm in the winter, to get in and drive, because those cold starts and idling after that are so devastating. We've got to educate our public better on these things.
Aimee, when you talk about executing on these issues, describe to our audience your leadership profile. What are your touchstones in leadership?
Well, for me, leadership means surrounding yourself with the best people. It means that you find people who aren't just going to be yes men and women, but that you find people who are going to be able to help execute your vision. I think a leader has to be able to see around corners and have a vision for the future. We know where we want to be. We want to have clean air. We want to not ever have to make decisions between the air we breathe and being indoors. And so having a vision for that is so important. We need somebody who's going to be able to execute. We also need somebody who's got principles, who's going to be able to lay out principles for every decision being made and execute on those. So those are some of the things that I value.
Yeah. I grew up skiing in the Wasatch Canyons. I love Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon. You're a Salt Lake County councilwoman. Do you have a plan for transportation congestion and air quality problems in the canyons?
We're actually working on that right now in Salt Lake County. We're partnering with the Central Wasatch Commission, where we've got a conglomerate of different people from different areas that are impacted by those canyons, and we're working on that right now. And the funny thing about this is it's not one person being able to dictate, here's what it should be. There are so many different entities that own pieces of the canyon or have jurisdiction. And so we've got to really work together. We need somebody who knows how to build bridges, who's a collaborator, who can bring people together to solve these problems.
Aimee, I don't know of a more divisive issue in recent years than the inland port. I want to hear your thoughts about an inland port and our airshed. What plan would you have either to oppose the inland port or to make sure the inland port didn't compromise our air quality status?
Well, the inland port was coming whether we like it or not. The property is already privately owned. People recognize the value there with being able to bring in goods, and so it's coming whether the state got involved or not. I think it's good that the state has gotten involved, because for me, the the qualities I want to see in the inland port, I want to make sure it's environmentally friendly, that we're executing on those values that we hold dear. The other thing is I'm hopeful that as we can better coordinate the shipping, that we can get more trucks off of the road and perhaps not even coming into the Wasatch Front if we can utilize the hub and spoke model in rural Utah like we've talked. So those are some of my hopes for the inland port.
That's great. Last question. I'd love you to give us one word that would characterize your thoughts on air quality. What's needed?
Vision. We've got to have good vision. You're
supposed to laugh at that, everyone. Do you know why we're laughing? That's what the former candidate said.
Well, I'm glad I picked the right answer.
You're in good
then.
company. Aimee Winder-Newton.
Thanks.
Thanks, Aimee. Yeah.